So, as you will see, as opposed to the plan is to improve net export, but net export is not going to improve, okay? So that is strange, But don't forget that this is the outcome for small open economies. So as you can see, small open economies, this is just useless. Applying tariffs, okay? So short-term equilibrium. So why it doesn't improve net export at the end of the road? Because of this. You see, applying quotas, tariffs, so improve. See, initially it improves net export. So net export rises. So at any exchange rate, remember the shift. So, but net export is part of planned expenditure. Okay, planned expenditure rises. So output rises. Okay. But be careful at the end. What happens at the end? So demand for real money rises. So people tend to sell bonds. Remember that? People run out of liquidity. Okay. Sell bonds. Bonds become cheaper. Domestic interest rate tends to go above foreign interest rate. Remember, these two are equal. Okay. This is just a pressure that doesn't materialize. Why it doesn't materialize? Because it triggers capital inflow, and this capital inflow doesn't let this happen at the end of the day. But capital inflow happens. But capital inflow means what? Capital inflow means demand for domestic assets, domestic currency rises. Is that right? So what happens? Demand for domestic assets, domestic currency rises. It means domestic currency becomes stronger. Okay? So nominal appreciation. Stronger domestic currency. But you remember, this is short run. Short run, prices are fixed, therefore nominal exchange rate and real exchange rate move together. You remember that? In few minutes, we are going to talk about long run. You don't have this in long run, because in long run prices are changing too. But in short run, so real appreciation happens. Is that right? Okay, but what does that mean? Real appreciation. Real appreciation means domestic goods become more expensive. Foreign goods become cheaper. So what happens? Net export tends to fall. This is everything, guys. You see, here initially we started by net export improving, but here net export is deteriorating. So in fact, these two cancel each out. So net export doesn't move eventually. Therefore, output doesn't change eventually. Is that right? So consumption doesn't change eventually. Of course, investment doesn't change because investment is a function of domestic interest rate. Domestic interest rate is already stuck at foreign interest rate. Do you see that? So you see, that's why this is not effective in small open economies. Tariffs, any trade barrier is not useful, is not helping. Okay, but what happened, guys? It looks like nothing is changing, but there are some changes. It doesn't look like that way. See, net export doesn't change, output doesn't change, but you have to be careful you don't get misled like that. Why? You see? So let me show you why the details could be different. So as you can see, import restrictions cannot reduce a trade deficit at the end of the road. Net export doesn't change. Okay? So you see, that's the problem. If you take a course in trade, they tell you that gains, net export is unchanged, but guys, this is the change that you should not be misled. See here, total trade will be lower. Okay, so let me write it here. You see, net export is export minus import. This is fixed, but be careful. Total trade is export plus import. Export plus import. Okay? So, look at here. This doesn't change because import goes down, export goes down equally. Therefore, net export remains the same. But total, when this goes down, total trade goes down. Okay? Did you see that? So it's more than the appearance. Net export is fixed. But why net export is fixed? Because export has gone down because of the policy. Import goes down because of appreciation. By the way, I am going to write it. Okay? So this is very crucial. It doesn't mean nothing is happening. Total trade is falling. So that's why trade barriers are not good, because in trade they teach you that everybody benefits from trade. Can you see that here? So that part goes down. So let me write it here. Make sure everybody can see everything here, but you have to be careful. Net export is export minus import. Total trade is export plus import. Okay. So let me right here. See, trade restriction reduces import. Here, import goes down, but at the same time, exchange rate appreciation reduces export. Can you see that? So here, import goes down, and here, export goes down. Is that right? Equally. Both of them go down equally. Net export remains the same, but total trade falls. Actually, the same thing is true about total output. You remember I said total output, total real GDP remains the same. But does it mean everything is the same? No. You see, you remember first I said output goes down, and at the end I said output goes up, and they cancel each out. Can you see that? Yes, total output remains the same. However, output structure is different. Output structure is different. You see here, trade, you see, restriction goes down. Sorry, because of restrictions, import goes down. Who is benefiting from that? So, import restrictions, you see, save jobs and output in domestic import competing industries. You see, there are domestic industries that used to compete with what? Importers, foreigners, okay, foreign good. Because import goes down, they are better off. So import competing industries are going to get more employment, more output, okay? Who is losing? Export producing sectors, they lose jobs, they lose output. You understand? Total GDP remains the same, but this output of these guys, export producing sectors, goes down, and output of import competing industries goes up, so they cancel each out. You see that? So I said at the end, these two cancel each out, but structure of GDP is different. Structure of employment is different. And also, total trade is different. Okay, one more thing. You see, you have sectoral shift. So, GDP, total GDP looks the same, but you have sectoral shifts. You see that? So it's not 100% neutral. And in fact, this is what Mr. Trump is trying to do. Even if, as I said, large open economies like US, it has effects, okay? But even if it doesn't have effect, he wants to what? He wants to make sure that import is restricted and import competing industries in US win. This is what he wants, okay? So that makes sectors in US that used to be strong, but they are not strong anymore because foreign competition made them weak. So he wants to bring back those. For example, did you hear yesterday? So Microsoft is going to invest in where? Colorado, a bunch of $1 billion. Actually, it shouldn't be in news, okay? Because Microsoft is American, okay? Investing in US should not make a news, but they made this announcement because they are what? They are bringing back their investment to US. So this is exactly what he wants. He doesn't care about gain from trade, is that right? So it was just protection. Okay, that was floating exchange rate. As I said, floating exchange rate is a system that exchange rate is determined by the market. You see, guys, exchange rate, I am talking about nominal exchange rate. Exchange rate regimes could be anything within a range, okay? So, so-called flexible or floating exchange regimes, systems that we discussed, okay? And the other extreme is called fixed or pegged. So in this system, exchange rate is set by policymakers. So policymakers. So the other extreme, fully flexible, is set by market. Okay? You see, I told you, academic models everywhere in engineering and medical science, economics, finance. We always write down models for extreme cases. Real life cases are somewhere in between. So different countries are in that range. For example, like US, Canada, Japan, I mean, they are closer to flexible. They are closer to flexible, okay? Closer to flexible. So it doesn't mean policymakers don't intervene, especially in Japan. Whenever Japanese yen starts becoming stronger, so Japanese central bank is intervening by buying a US dollar, making Japanese yen weaker. Why? Because remember, Japanese yen weaker means cheaper Japanese goods. That is that they can compete better. Okay, so, but overall, it's more closer to flexible. Okay, so now different countries are somewhere in the middle. Okay, so a very famous case, China is the most famous case of fixed or pegged exchange system. Okay, it used to be absolutely fixed, but now it's closer to this area. Okay, so it's called managed fixed. In fact, I have the graph here. Here, you see, this is dollar per yuan. So as you can see here, for 1995 to 2005, it was absolutely fixed. Can you see that? Completely fixed. Actually, it's better to call it pegged, okay? But fixed is easier, okay? Pegged means it's not fixed. Chinese yuan is still going up and down, but it is fixed with respect to the United States dollar, US dollar. Can you see it here? So that's why it is called pegged to one currency. So as US dollar goes up and down, Chinese yuan goes up and down, but it used to be so-called hard pegged. Can you see that? But then after that, they let it go gradually. Can you see that? Can you see that? But fluctuations are not called, it is not dirty flexible, okay? So it is called managed pegged. Can you see that? So every day, China's central bank announces a rate and keeps fluctuation limited within a range. Okay, can you see it here? So, but still, as I said, this is the closest thing that we have to pegged or fixed system. Okay, so There is no, but our model is about absolutely pegged. In real life, we don't have absolutely flexible or absolutely pegged, okay? So what's going on? Again, we are going extreme case, fixed, pegged, okay? Exchange regime. As I said, in this system, nominal, be careful, nominal, not real exchange rate is set by policymakers. So when I write E bar, I mean set by policymakers, so we are referring to pegged system. Pegged system. Can you see it here? So policymakers set the rate, but don't forget that if policymakers set a rate, that rate doesn't become the rate, okay? They have to do something about that. A rate doesn't become the market rate just by announcement, okay? So generally, day-to-day transaction is given to central bank to defend the rate, support the rate. Can you see it here? Without support, it doesn't materialize. So what does that mean, defend or support the rate? It means central bank, when you announce a rate, when you set a rate, central bank should start transacting, buying, selling, foreign exchange at that rate. Can you see that? So otherwise, it doesn't become the rate, okay? So I am going to show you how central bank should support the rate, defend the rate, okay? Don't forget that I am talking about small, open economy with perfect capital mobility, okay? Again, generally that is extreme case because generally in real life, we don't have small open economy with perfect capital mobility, okay? I'll talk about that, how countries choose their system, okay? So, and also, this is very important. This is important all the time. Guys, government, policymakers can control only nominal variables. Remember, real variables are not observable, so they have no control over real variables. So in future, when we do exercises, note that in fixed exchange rate, pegged exchange rate, nominal exchange rate is pegged. It is fixed, okay? But the real exchange rate can change because nobody has any control over real variables. Why? Because long run. Because in long run, prices are changing and nobody can control prices. Even if you keep nominal exchange rate fixed, real exchange rate can still go around, okay? So, of course, in short run, remember prices are fixed. Nominal, real exchange rates move together. So in short run, when policymakers peg nominal exchange rate, real exchange rate is also pegged too in short run, but not in long run, okay? Generally, all government policies, all policymakers' policies are about nominal variables because real variables are not observable, okay? So if you go to a bank, you can ask about your nominal interest rate we talked about. You can go to a bank and ask for nominal exchange rate, nominal interest rate. If you ask them, what is real interest rate today? They say, what's real interest rate? If you ask them, what is real exchange rate today? What does that mean? Okay? This is very important. Policies are about nominal variables. Okay, so you see, I said central bank generally is given authority for day-to-day managing exchange rate. So from now onward, I may say central bank, so I mean central bank transactions on daily basis because exchange rate can be set by policymakers. So for example, in my country, we have also pegged exchange rate today, if you go back to, but parliament sets the rate, IBAR, okay? But they set the rate and they give it to central bank to do what? Manage it. You remember? Support it, defend it, making the rate the rate. Okay? So now, how can the central bank defend the rate, support the rate? Okay, so you know that in each country there is a market for foreign exchange. Okay, because US dollar is very popular. So let's imagine US dollar market in any country. Okay, and because China is the closest thing to peg system, so imagine this is a market for US dollar in China, suppose. Or again, I am going to use my own country too, okay? So, you see, this is not macro, okay? I want to give you an idea from micro point of view. You know that if you ask your microeconomic course instructor how exchange rate is determined, they do what? Supply and demand for. Because exchange, foreign exchange is like watermelon, okay? Supply and demand for foreign exchange determines what? Exchange rate. Is that right? So be careful. I am doing this just to give you an idea about support, but our model is eventually macro model that we are going to discuss. Okay, imagine this is a US dollar market in China. So we have what? Supply and demand for US dollar in China. Okay, so here, this is microeconomics. Price of dollar, and this is quantity of dollar. Okay, so you see, as I said, it's like supply and demand for watermelon, potatoes. Supply and demand for US dollar in China, okay? By the way, did you see that? So this is supply curve, be careful. This is supply curve, this is demand curve, okay? Why? It looks like this, because remember in your textbook, we defined exchange rate, nominal exchange rate as price of a foreign currency in terms of domestic currency, okay? So I am teaching another textbook that I mentioned that before. That textbook uses other way around definition. So if you use that definition, then you have regular supply and demand, okay? But here, supply and demand look is like that, okay? Let me show you why. You see, suppose Chinese yuan. You see, if you go, suppose you go here. If exchange rate in China goes up, what does that mean? You have appreciation. Appreciation of nominal appreciation. Nominal appreciation means what? Domestic currency becomes stronger. US dollar becomes weaker. Okay? So if you go this way, so US dollar would be what? Kind of cheaper, weaker. So when you go up, US dollar becomes cheaper, so supply of US dollar goes down. Because when a product becomes cheaper, its supply becomes smaller. And on the other hand, demand becomes larger because US dollar is cheaper, so more people want to buy it. Okay, so this is supply and demand for US dollar in China. So when we say flexible exchange rate, we mean this. If you ask person in micro class how exchange rate is determined, they tell you this, micro, okay? Okay, this is flexible exchange rate, supply and demand. Okay, but what is pegged exchange system in this case? Okay, you see, if you go today in China, so policymakers don't like this one. They like something like this one. So you remember I said they set this rate here. So it means in China, US dollar is artificially stronger. So they make domestic currency artificially weaker. Okay? Now guys, what's wrong with this picture? So if central bank, if policymakers in China announce this rate, what's wrong with this? Anyone? What do you see from the place that you are sitting over there? Okay. So what's wrong with E-bar 1? Yeah, there is no problem with that. Yes? Sorry again? Yeah, I mean, you see, there is there is excess demand, excess supply of US dollar, is that right? Excess supply of US dollar, is that right? So it means if central bank sets this rate and goes home, nothing happens. So it stays here. So how can central bank defend the rate? Central bank has to, look at that, central bank has to buy US dollar. Can you see that? So in order to make E bar 1, the rate, Central Bank of China has to do what? Continuously buy US dollar. Is that right? Otherwise, it goes back to E. Agree? Okay, okay. This is the issue in China. Now, let's go back to my country, back home country, okay? Today, right now, okay? So this is what they did. This is exactly what they did. So what's wrong with this? So here you have excess what? Excess demand for US dollar, is that right? Excess demand for US dollar. So how should central bank defend that rate? E2, E-bar 2. So here central bank has to what? Keep selling US dollar, is that right? Agree? Otherwise, this rate doesn't become the rate. Agree? Of course, as we're going to talk about that in a few minutes today, so managing this rate is much more difficult than managing this rate. Why? What's the problem? Okay, if you want to set a rate above market rate, which means making domestic currency artificially stronger and making US dollar artificially weaker. Okay, so your central bank has to keep selling US dollar, is that right? So what's wrong with that? Yes? Yeah, because actually in China, okay, they print domestic currency and buy US dollar. Of course, that causes, as you will see, inflation. Okay, that China solved that problem in a different way. But as she said, for back of my country, central bank should keep selling US dollar, but you cannot print US dollar. You run out of US dollar, and then that rate doesn't become manageable. Okay, but we are talking about on paper. Yeah. So this is, defend. Central bank has to properly buy, sell foreign exchange in order to make those rates the market rate. Otherwise, they don't work. Okay, let's go back to China again. In China, central bank should keep buying US dollar. So actually this is China's central bank stock of American assets. Okay, you know that when you want to hold US dollar, you don't hold US dollar because currency doesn't pay return. Okay, so you need to buy what? What they do is they buy bonds, American bonds. Is that right? Because American bonds pay interest. Is that right? Okay, can you see it here? So this is stock of foreign so-called reserves, US dollar. Okay, can you see that? This magic number, at some point, actually nobody knows for sure. Okay, so here I found this, referring to China's balance sheet, central bank balance sheet. You see, that number was called magic number, something like 3.4 trillion. I'm talking about trillion with T, okay, dollars, US bonds they have. Where did that come from? Managing fixed exchange rate, artificially below rate, national rate, market rate, so they should keep buying. Now, back on my country, central bank should keep selling US dollar, and as she said, they run out. So that's why if you need US dollar, you have to go to waiting list. So I remember when I was PhD student, so my tuition was supposed to come from my country, okay? So you know that, some of you, all of you actually, there is a deadline to deposit your tuition, otherwise they cancel your registration, is that right? So yeah, I mean, it was due next Monday, and then I called my home, okay, where is the money? I mean, they said, oh, okay, you are in waiting list for US dollar. I said, okay, when does it come? They said, okay, in next 5 years, it would be your turn. 5 years, I mean, it's due next Monday. This is what it is, all right? So we are going to talk about that in a few minutes, managing that. Okay, so as you can see, they have stash of US dollar, and back home my country we have $0. Okay, because you don't have. Okay, so let's repeat my exercises for flexible exchange system. Okay, suppose my initial equilibrium is 0.0. Did you see that? E bar. When I put E bar, I mean what? It is paired fixed exchange rate. Okay. Okay, you remember my traditional monetary policy, fiscal policy, things like that. Now, guys, when you study fixed exchange system, please go one by one with flexible. Fixed and flexible, the same cases. Okay, so we did expansionary monetary policy. Okay, so expansionary monetary policy means what? Central bank starts buying bonds. You know that? You know, old-fashioned approach that we had long time ago. So central bank increases money supply. Is that right? Okay. What happens? You see? What's wrong with this? You remember? This is fixed exchange rate. It means the central bank has to keep exchange rate at this rate. But if central bank applies expansionary monetary policy and you don't defend it, so you end up what? Here. Please compare flexible versus fixed. Okay? Flexible, you went here, but not here. So what should we do? So you see, in order to keep exchange rate at this rate, so central bank has to do what? You see, if central bank doesn't do anything, that exchange rate is happening, not possible. So in order to keep exchange rate at E bar, central bank has to apply contractionary monetary policy. So expansionary monetary policy leads to contractionary monetary policy. So it means what? Guys, this is the biggest outcome of fixed exchange system. Small open economy, be careful. Perfect capital mobility. So it means what? It means under fixed exchange system, generally central bank is not able to shift LM curve. Impossible. It's impossible. Okay? I show you the details why it is impossible. Okay? So in fact, under fixed exchange system, for small open economies with perfect capital mobility, monetary policies don't exist anymore. Okay? So money supply becomes endogenous. Market determines money supply, not central bank. Central bank has to follow what market wants. So monetary policy is not an option anymore. So under fixed exchange rate, small open economy, monetary policies don't exist. Okay? So let me show you why. Expansionary monetary policy, central bank buys bonds. Bonds become more expensive. So interest rate, domestic interest rate tends to go below foreign interest rate, tends. It doesn't happen. But that pressure is enough to induce capital outflow because domestic interest rate is too low. Capital outflow means what? demand for foreign assets, foreign currency rises. Guys, under fixed exchange rate, central bank should always accommodate. It's called accommodation. So you see here, if people want more foreign currency, central bank has to sell them more foreign currency. Okay, this is called, you remember the defense I said? That is accommodation policy. So look at here, why that is the case? Suppose central bank doesn't do anything. So people want more foreign currency, okay? So it means what? It means, please double check flexible exchange rate. In flexible exchange rate, here I wrote depreciation happens. But here, depreciation cannot happen. So there is a depreciation pressure. So here we have two pressure. This pressure, interest rate tends to go below foreign interest rate, and also exchange rate pressure, okay? But don't forget that central bank has to defend the rate and keep the rate fixed. How? I showed you. Central bank has to sell foreign currency. You see here? Remember accommodation. People want capital outflow. People want more foreign currency, foreign reserves. So central bank has to sell foreign reserve. But don't forget that when central bank sells foreign reserves, they collect what? They collect domestic currency. Is this contractionary? So, guys, if central bank buys anything, it doesn't matter what it is, it's expansionary. Money supply goes up. If central bank sells anything, is contractionary. Okay? So M tends to go down because of this. So what happens is this decrease in M, this increase in M, cancel each out. I mean, M, remember, M cannot change, cannot be changed by central bank. So monetary policies don't exist under peg system. But I told you, M, money supply remains the same, but it doesn't mean everything is the same. Okay? There is something which is different. And what is that? You see? After this, central bank couldn't do anything, but one thing happened. Number one, central bank has more domestic bonds, look at that, and less foreign currency. So it means what? It means central bank loses its foreign reserve, okay, without affecting anything. So that's why under flexible exchange rate, fixed exchange rate, expansionary monetary policy is just useless. And central bank just loses its foreign reserves. Okay, so let me finalize it here. On the floating exchange system, monetary policy is very effective. I told you guys, when you go home, read flexible, fixed next to each other, one by one. Okay? Floating monetary policy was very effective, but here, on the fixed exchange rate, monetary policies are just not effective. You're just losing foreign reserves. Therefore, we are not going to talk about monetary policies under fixed exchange rate. Monetary policies are out. So, guys, you see, there is always a friction back home. I died so much friction with politicians. So there is in countries with fixed exchange system, there is the friction between politicians and economists. Why? Because please compare fixed and flexible. So you realize one thing. You see, out of two variables, money supply and exchange rate, you can decide as policymaker which one you want to choose, which one you choose to control. And the other one, you should not intervene. So one of them can be controlled by policymakers, one of them can be controlled by market. You cannot control both of them. Unfortunately, policymakers want to control both of them, everything, which is not possible. Okay? So, remember that, because you have a very tough time when dealing with politicians. You see here? So, what is flexible exchange system? Flexible exchange system is a system that policymakers control M, market controls E, exchange rate, nominal exchange rate. So, policymakers control M by what? Expansionary, contractionary monetary policy. You know that? But under fixed or pegged exchange system, policymakers control nominal exchange rate, but they have to leave monetary policies, not monetary policy, money supply to market. Market determines M. So under fixed exchange rate, expansionary, contractionary monetary policies don't exist. However, you have a new set of policies. Revaluation, devaluation policies. Revaluation, devaluation policies. But you may wonder, what are those policies? Okay? So let me define revaluation policy. You see, revaluation policy is a policy if policymakers set exchange rate higher. Exchange rate higher. Okay? So it means making domestic currency stronger. Okay? That is called revaluation policy. So you see, this is very important. Revaluation policy and depreciation are the same thing. You remember what was, not depreciation, appreciation. Revaluation and appreciation. You remember? Appreciation of domestic currency is what? Domestic currency becoming stronger. So revaluation means domestic currency becomes stronger. The same thing, one big difference. Revaluation is done by policymakers, appreciation is done by market. Okay, you see? These two are the same thing, but one of them is done by policymakers, one of them is done by market. Okay, so revaluation, appreciation, and the other one is this, devaluation. Devaluation. Devaluation is when exchange rate, nominal exchange rate is set lower. Okay? So it means what? It means making domestic currency weaker. Okay? So, guys, devaluation and depreciation are the same thing. The only difference here is devaluation is done by policymakers, depreciation is done by market. You see that? So if market reduces strength of domestic currency, we don't call that devaluation, we call that depreciation. If policymakers decide on that, that is called devaluation. But from conceptual point of view, it means domestic currency becomes weaker and foreign currency becomes strong. Okay, but who does it? So we don't have monetary policies, but we have evaluation, revaluation policies. Okay, you remember? We don't have monetary policies, I showed you. So let's try devaluation policy. How about that? Suppose, did you see that? Suppose policymakers decide to make domestic currency weaker. Okay? So this is a policy that China is applying. Why? Why China is trying to do that? Okay? So we are going to investigate that. Okay? The incentives behind that. Okay? Okay, suppose today they announce devaluation. Can you see that? So exchange rate is set, not goes, is set lower. But guys, if central bank doesn't defend this, so it doesn't happen. Okay? See, if policymakers today in national radio, they announce this rate and they don't do anything, so nothing happens. So what happens is just economy remains there. Okay? So you tell me, how should central bank defend that rate? Anyone? How should central bank defend that rate? Yes? Sorry? Yeah, or expansionary monetary policies. Can you see that? So she's right. You see? So you have to shift this here. Is that right? She's right. You see here? You see, if you don't do anything, you stay there. But exactly as she said, you need to expand money. Did you see that? Central bank is not a choice for central bank. Central bank has to do this. Because in other section, when I said money supply is endogenous, a person asked, you mean market prints money? So no, market doesn't print money, but exactly as she said, central bank has to follow what market wants. Market wants this much money supply. A central bank has to just do it. If central bank doesn't do it, you will stay at point O. Announcement doesn't make the rate the rate. Yes, she's absolutely right. Okay? So, short-run equilibrium. But let's see. Let's see how exactly. Oh, by the way, did you see that? Devaluation is very effective in short run. Did you see that? Output goes up, but output goes up why? As you are going to see, because net export improvement. Net export improvement. Let me write the details for you. So, devaluation policy. Okay. Devaluation policy. So it means what? It means domestic currency becomes weaker. Okay. But remember, this is short run. Prices are fixed. So when you have devaluation, it means you are going to have real depreciation. Is that right? Is that right? You remember that? In short run, E and epsilon move together. Okay, okay, but what does that mean? That is very important. That is real depreciation, means domestic goods are cheaper. Is that right? And foreign goods are more expensive. So export rises, import falls, net export improvement. Do you see that? So, but net export is part of planned expenditure. Is that right? It's open economy. Net export is part of the right-hand side of IS. So inventories fall and firms adjust their output. So output rises. Do you see that? So increase in output is because of improvement in net export. Net export rises. Okay? So demand, you know the rest. Demand for money rises. People start selling bonds. Bonds become cheaper. So domestic interest rate tends to go above foreign interest rate. Of course, this cannot happen because capital inflow is triggered. But capital inflow is trying to do what? They are trying to oppose. You see? Demand for domestic assets, domestic currency rises. So that, you see, that puts appreciation pressure. So you remember I told you. So here E tends to go up. I told you, let me go back to the graph. You see here? If central bank announces that rate and doesn't do anything, devaluation doesn't happen, depreciation doesn't happen. You see? Economy tends to push it back, appreciation. Of course, that's the difference between fixed and flexible. Oh, wow. So, you see, I wrote pressure. So if you check with the flexible exchange rate, here I wrote appreciation happens. Please double check. But here, pressure, but central bank has to defend the rate by removing that pressure. How should central bank remove that pressure? You remember? Accommodation. So here you have capital inflow. It means what? It means central bank should keep buying foreign exchange which is coming to the country. So how do you, of course, exactly as she said, how does central bank buy foreign currency? Okay, they have to print money. Okay, so buy foreign currency. So that means money supply rises. Okay, did you see that? Defending the rate. Defending the rate. Okay. So output does go up. Consumption goes up. So interest rate is fixed because foreign interest rate, investment would be fixed. Do you see that? So actually, this is the essence of what China is trying to do. China is trying, you see, China became China by this policy. Because what? Depreciation, okay, and net export improvement, okay, and look at that. You see, this is what they wanted. Output goes up, net export goes up, output goes up, and also central bank has to keep buying US dollar. You know what that stash of US dollar that they have is simply because of this policy. Yes, everyone? Okay, let's do regular fiscal policy. How about that? You remember, under flexible exchange rate, fiscal policy was not effective. Please double check. Please read flexible and fixed. Together. So expansion fiscal policy. So we have done this 1 million times now. When G goes up, IS shifts to the right. IS shifts to the right. But look, if central bank doesn't do anything, you remember flexible exchange rate that we did in the first part of this chapter? So we went here. Okay, so if central bank doesn't defend, we still go there. Okay, but central bank is here. It goes there. But central bank is supposed to defend this rate. How should central bank defend that rate? Exactly going back to what she said a few seconds ago. So central bank has to increase money supply. So G goes up, output goes up. Yes, everyone? So what happens intuitively? Okay, because we don't see everything here. So G goes up, planned expenditure goes up, inventories fall, you remember excess demand, and then firms increase their output. So demand for real money rises, but central bank doesn't change money supply at this point. So people tend to sell bonds. Bonds become cheaper. So interest rate tends to go above stock, okay? Tends to go there, but it doesn't go there because there is a rush of capital inflow. So capital inflow means demand for domestic currency rises. So if central bank doesn't do anything, remember, appreciation happens. Flexible. Please double check with the flexible exchange system. So appreciation happens, but here central bank is going to intervene. So central bank keeps buying foreign currency. Okay, when central bank keeps buying foreign currency, so what does it give people? Domestic, as she said, you have to print money and give people. So So money supply rises. Did you see that? Money supply is not exogenous. Money supply is endogenous now. It's not an option for central bank. Central bank has to follow the market needs. Okay, so consumption rises also. So on the floating exchange rate, human fiscal policies were ineffective. Please double check. But here, under fixed exchange system, fiscal policies are effective. It means they increase output. They increase output. Just for the sake of comparison, remember I asked you to go home and compare these policies, and also, guys, I covered everything. Every potential question in final exam would be one of these cases. Okay, I mean, from shift point of view. Okay, so remember, this is what we did at the beginning of the hour for flexible exchange rate. So, you see here, you remember, you remember this very well because we did it today. Okay, so any tariff tends to improve net export, shift IS to the right, but you remember flexible exchange system, we went there. So yes, import went down, but because of appreciation, export went down equally, net export remained the same, but not here. Why? Because this exchange rate is not allowed. This exchange rate is not allowed. So what should central bank do? Central bank has to increase money supply, okay, to support that rate. So did you see that? So in this case, trade barriers, tariffs, are effective, as a matter of fact, are effective, okay? So that's another incentive that China has, and Mr. Trump is continuously criticizing China, partly because of this. Can you see that? Because they, under fixed exchange rate, they also trade barriers are helping. Okay, how? You see? So trade barriers, so net export goes up. Okay, so planned expenditure rises, inventories fall, output rises eventually, demand for money rises. You have seen this 1 million times in the past. People sell bonds become cheaper. So domestic interest rate tends to go above foreign interest rate. So capital inflow is triggered. Demand for domestic assets, domestic currency rises. Appreciation pressure. Now, if you go back to flexible exchange rate, appreciation happened, but not here. Why? Because central bank is going to buy all that inflow, increase money supply, so keep exchange rate fixed. Okay, keep exchange rate fixed. So money supply goes up, so consumption also rises. Okay, so interest rate fixed, nominal exchange rate fixed because this is fixed exchange system. In short run, epsilon E are helping each other. Can you see it here? So in this case, as a matter of fact, trade barriers are very effective. Very effective. So, guys, let me compare this case. On the floating exchange rate, import restrictions don't affect total output and total net export. Okay, but on the fixed exchange rate, import restrictions increase both. You saw that. Net export and output. So actually, where this gain in output and net export came from? It came from monetary policy. You remember that? An expansion in monetary policy was applied. Okay, and that expansion in monetary policy helped increase output and net export. Okay, so the monetary policy part, in fact, helped. Okay, actually, you see, this is a problem. This is international problem. That's why US and China have continuously this problem, friction with each other. Because this policy, see, so this policy, domestic output and domestic net export improve at the expense of foreign country. At the expense of foreign country. See that? So that's the problem. So this policy shifts demand from foreign goods to domestic goods. So net export improvement and output improvement, unemployment benefits, okay? But it's not that it affects world demand. No, it just switch. So that would be at the expense of foreign countries. So that's why there is international friction between among countries about fixing exchange rate and about trade barriers. So actually there is no shortage of that these days, okay? Because in previous years, I remember when I was teaching this, students had no idea because there was nothing in news. But today, so guys, this table, I am going to summarize everything. So fixed exchange rate versus floating exchange rate, comparing fiscal policies, monetary policies, import restrictions. Is that right? So this is the summarize of everything. You see, expansionary fiscal policies. So you see, not affecting under floating exchange rate because G went up, but net export went down. You were crowding out effect. We talked about that first part of this chapter. So they cancel each other. Okay. However, under pegged system, so net export exchange rates were fixed. Okay. So when G goes up, output goes up. Very effective. Very effective under pegged system. Monetary policies, okay, is exactly the other way around. So monetary policies, expansionary monetary policies cause depreciation and net export improvement and also output improvement. But I told you, monetary policies don't exist under fixed exchange rate. Fixed exchange rate. Okay, this is so important. Import restrictions. Import restrictions had no effect under flexible exchange rate. Can you see it here? So import restriction was cancelled out by appreciation of exchange rate. That's it. It's a no change in export, no change in output. But as a matter of fact, it's very, very effective under pegged system. You see that? Net export, you see, you have the target. The target was achieved. Improvement net export, improvement in output, but at the expense of other countries. So that's why it's politically controversial. So please go and look at the details. This is a summary of everything up to here in this chapter. So now the question here is, which one is better, fixed or flexible? Fixed or flexible? You see, flexible is good because it gives you the power of using monetary policies. So if your economy is in recession, you can apply expansionary monetary policies. But you're under fixed, they don't exist. Okay. So if there is any shock so monetary policies can be applied. And number two, as you will see more in few minutes, flexible exchange rate is neutralizing many shocks automatically. Actually, that would be clearer in a few minutes. So the beauty of flexible exchange rate that most countries are following now is flexible exchange rate offsets many shocks automatically without policymakers even knowing that. Okay, so that is a very big advantage, and you are going to see that in a few minutes. Okay, so what are benefits of fixed exchange rate? So number one, see, uncertainty. Flexible exchange rate, sometimes people call that dirty flexible because exchange rate may change every day. Is that right? So it may create sort of uncertainty. Okay, but fixed exchange rate so gives you some degree of certainty. Okay, and also remember under fixed exchange rate, monetary policies don't exist. Monetary policies don't exist. So that's why it's a good control over monetary policies. So if you don't trust your policy, central bank, monetary officials, so fixed exchange rates regime can help you because monetary policies don't exist. They cannot change money supply. Okay. However, in practice, they do. Because I lived almost 90% of my life under fixed exchange rate back in my country. So honestly, they don't care. I mean, politicians who are not accountable, they are not accountable anyway. Okay. So now let's talk about. Okay, I mentioned my home country. So you remember I promised you talk about. I said an exchange rate above the rate, which makes foreign country too cheap and domestic country artificially too strong. What's wrong with that? You see, it causes something called speculative attacks. Okay, so in countries with fixed exchange rate, that kind of fixed exchange rate, not kind of China, opposite side of China. So speculative attacks are everyday news. What is that? You remember, as she said, in this case, central bank has to do what? Central bank has to keep selling US dollar. Is that right? But if, exactly as she said, if central bank runs out of US dollar, so what happens? So what happens? So then this rate is not manageable. When this rate is not manageable, it collapses this to this. So it means depreciation happens. So if people become aware that central bank doesn't have resources, enough US dollar, so what they rush to central bank to buy all assets, all foreign reserves of central bank. Okay, the first person in the lineup, you have not seen lineup in front of central bank in your life, more likely. Okay, but I have been that line. So I mean, the first person in the line is going to buy every US dollar that central bank has. Is that right? Because they know that tomorrow morning, when that rate crashes, US dollar becomes stronger and you make this money. Okay, so that is called a speculative attack. So problem if people come to the central bank to buy a large sum of foreign currency. Okay, so as she said, foreign reserve assets fall to zero. Actually, sometimes even you don't need that thing happens. You don't need that they run out of US dollar. Okay, so even a rumor. You remember we talked about this. Sometimes people's expectations may not be right, but there are rumors that they don't have enough reserves. Can you see it here? So suppose they have enough reserves, but people think they don't have enough reserves. what happens? Speculative attack. Everybody runs to buy US dollar. It's like a bank run. So everybody runs to buy US dollar as fast as possible. You see, that's a problem. Rumors, even baseless rumors, are self-fulfilling. Because if everyone in the economy, suppose central bank has enough US dollar, okay, to manage that rate, okay? But more people show up. Everyone shows up because of the rumor. And when everybody shows up, of course, central bank doesn't have unlimited amount of US dollar. Even if you have enough reserve to manage that, okay? So when more people show up that they don't need, see, they don't need US dollar, but they just change domestic currency to US dollar and they put it under the mattress, okay, just in case. So even if you have infinite amount of US dollar, you run out of US dollar. So that is called speculative attack. And these attacks are happening every day, and fixed exchange rate this way. Okay, actually, let me stop here for 15 minutes break, and when we come back, we are going to, of course, I am going to mention a few details, and then we start long version of this, okay? Okay, so please come back 10:45.